Before this video starts, I'd like to thank you guys so much for 100,000 subscribers. I'm so happy right now, it's insane. I was watching it go up and we were all celebrating. It was amazing and I never thought I'd get this far. Thank you so much, everyone. To think it hasn't even been a year and I'm already so attached to you guys. Thank you so much for supporting me, everyone. I really appreciate it. Anyway, enough yapping from me, but thank you again and please enjoy the video. Bye bye! Are your drawings and designs flat, lifeless, or perhaps they're clashy and hard to look at? If you're anything like me, you see posts of people's art using the most beautiful, scrumptious, exquisite colours, and you think to yourself, how are they doing that? What is this sorcery? What you're missing is knowledge of colour theory. I know from surface value it can look scary and confusing, but if a career in art or design is what you're looking for, then understanding colour theory is essential to learn. Believe me, when I learned how to actually use colours, it took my art from this to this. Of course, I'm not a professional, and my knowledge of colour theory is probably not as extensive as many others out there. But what I am good at is explaining it to fellow artists that are interested in making art their career like I am, or would just like to improve or learn something new. And so as always, grab your sketchbook, grab a cup of tea, and enjoy the video. Hey there, I'm Parako, and welcome to my silly little art channel. If you're interested in art tips, challenges, or just enjoy my art in general, feel free to stick around. And hey, maybe drop a like and subscribe if my channel seems like your type of thing. Okay, thanks! It can be difficult to know where to start when learning about colour. I mean, it's literally everywhere. The amount of colours we see in our daily lives is practically infinite, and so selecting just a few to use in your art or design is definitely less than easy. But never fear, all you need is knowledge of our good friend the colour wheel. What's a colour wheel? Well, I'm glad you asked. You've probably seen this image before in art classes. Broken down simply, it consists of the three primary colours, red, blue, and yellow, then the three secondary colours which you can achieve by mixing the primaries, so that is orange, green, and purple, and then the tertiary colours which are in-betweens of those. But did you know that this isn't the only one? First of all, the colour spectrum can be laid out simply in a Venn diagram, with each primary colour overlaying each other and mixing to show the secondary colours. There's also the split primary colour wheel, which separates red, blue, and yellow hues, which are useful if you're using analogous colour schemes, more on that later. There's the Munsell colour wheel, which focuses on saturation of each colour rather than depth or brightness, which we'll discuss later too. And then there's the Martian colour wheel, which has 24 hues and 5 tones, creating a display of 120 different colours. Whoa. Now, this is more from a perspective of design or photography, but it's also important to understand the RGB and CMYK colour models, often used in technologies like cameras, printers, and editing software like Photoshop. RGB stands for red, blue, and yellow. Editing Parako here. RGB does not stand for red, blue, and yellow. It in fact stands for red, green, and blue. I knew that, that's what my script said. I don't know why I didn't say that. I'm sorry about that, everyone. Please continue to enjoy the video. And CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is just black. I know, that's a lot to take in. The good news is you don't have to know each of these colour wheels right off the bat. It's just good to keep them in mind when selecting a colour scheme for your piece. I get that those words sound a little confusing, so let me explain. Hue is basically just a colour, like blue, green, or red. It's what you see around the most basic model of the colour wheel. Saturation is how bright the colour is, and here you can see me increasing and decreasing the saturation of my art on Procreate. It's important to keep saturation of your art in mind, as too little saturation can make it appear dull, but too much saturation can make it look overly bright, unless of course that's how you want it to look. And value is how dark or light it is. It's good to keep value in mind when creating contrast in a piece. Again, I've mentioned this before, but I like to add an entirely white layer above my art when I render and set the blend mode to saturation so I can clearly see the contrast and values in my art without the distracting colours. Now that we have an idea of the basic terms of colour, let's take a look at using only a select few in our art. Why only a few, you ask? I've touched on this before in a past video, go check it out after this one, but the best and easiest way to improve your art in colour harmony is by limiting the amount of colours you use. The most simple colour scheme you can imagine is monochromatic. It's pretty self-explanatory. Monochromatic colour schemes consist of only one hue and varying saturations and values. Now these ones aren't completely monochromatic, but here are some examples I've done of pieces that consist of mostly purples. There's also complementary colour schemes. Now these are made of colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel. Using hues that directly contrast each other is a really good way to make elements stand out and breathe some life into your art. One very common combination is blue and orange. It's not very obvious upon first glance, but here you can see Sam Desarts has used very orange and vibrant tones for the skin and bluer tones on the white shirt and sky. See how vibrant and harmonious it looks while not clashing? Here you can see I've used a mintish green for the lighter tones of my composition, but balanced it out with pinks and purples in the deeper shadows. And here's my personal favourite, analogous colour schemes. I did bring this up in a past video, but an analogous colour scheme is when you use only 2 to 4 hues that lie next to each other on a colour wheel. Limiting your colour palette is an amazing way to take your art to the next level. It ensures your colours blend well together and creates a sense of harmony throughout the piece. Here I've used only blue, pink and purple hues, and I've done a similar thing on this one. Again, it's really not that difficult to get your head around colour theory. Once you know the basics, I promise you'll be able to incorporate it into your art and you'll be mastering it in no time. Let's go over some tips regarding colour that I like to use before and while I render. But first, of course, we need to sketch. I realised that I've never drawn Izuru on his own before, so I thought, hey, why not?
Yes, queen!
Anyway, we're going to start by choosing a colour scheme. I think it'll consist of mostly varying values of teal, and I'll balance that out with an orangish red. Yeah, that looks good. Since I'm drawing someone that is characterised by very, very long and dark hair, I'm going to do something I don't do very often and start painting with values only. This is so I can ensure everything is balanced out and distinct areas of the piece don't get muddied. I'd like to keep a sense of contrast throughout this drawing. Now I'm going to get a layer of teal and clip it above. I set the blend mode to colour and proceed to mess around with those values again until I have the shade I want. Next, I'm going in with a red and finding those points on his forehead and in his eyes where I can tie it all back to the background, which I also made red. I'm constantly trying my best to keep those complementary colours in check. I also added a bit of red bounce light on the edges of his hair and shoulders to tie it in with the background. Now we have our basic plan. You know what that means, it's time to render. While I render, I'm going to try and bring in other hues too, in order to breathe more life into it and make sure the piece isn't too boring, I guess. This is where hue shifting comes into play. I usually do this in the shaded areas or at the point where the shadows meet the highlights. Take a look at this point around the eye. The hue of the shadow is more blue towards the very start, underneath his eyebrow, but it shifts to a more reddish hue when it nears his eye. I also do this a lot when rendering hair to make sure that it's only the hue I'm changing, not the value. This adds a lot of interest and even texture into my rendering. Now, hue shifting often overlaps with subsurface scattering. Have you ever held your finger up to your phone flashlight and realized that it's made your finger glow bright red? That's because skin is translucent, meaning that in certain lightings, the shading on skin will be more saturated, particularly towards the edge of the shadow. And what I do when I render is I exploit the heck out of this mechanism, not just on skin, but kind of everything. I always make the edges of my shadows more saturated, regardless of texture or color. Why do I do this? Well, because it looks cool. Now remember, you do not have to render and use colours the same way I do. Art is subjective, and I'm in no way saying that this is the only way to finish off your art. It's just the way that I like to do it. The purpose of this video was only to educate artists like me on the rules of colour theory in a fun and light-hearted way. But hey, if you want to totally break them, be my guest. Ultimately, the most important thing about art is whether you're enjoying it or not. As always, I'd like to encourage you to leave any comments, questions, or feedback in the comment section down below, and send this video to someone who may need it. And if you found you learned something from this video today, comment with green hearts to let others know. It helps me out a lot, and it'll hopefully help you guys too. And the best part is, it's free and only takes 2 clicks. What a deal! Oh, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram, where I'll post finished pieces, works in progress, and possibly open commissions in the future. You can also buy me a coffee from this link here. All that aside, I wish you all the best of luck in your art journey. I promise you're gonna do great. Remember to drink some water, get some rest, have a hopeful day or night wherever you may be, and happy drawing!